A German woman on TikTok called out black women for their inability to have healthy relationships with black men, and she explained why it was easy for her to get a black man who I guess had previously dated black women, and why black women were no competition when it comes to competing with other cultures of women over their men. Let's take a look at this video.
I already knew I had him because there was simply no competition out there for me. But let's just look at it objectively. You had this average black American guy who now was able to choose between what he was dealing with before and somebody completely new. And let me tell you, the moment I stepped into that man's life, he really didn't know how to deal with my femininity because I was not loud. I was not screaming. I was not trying to, be louder than him. I didn't interrupt him because that's not something that I learned from home. If somebody would speak, and especially a man, you would let that man speak and then you would listen and then say whatever you have to say, right? So I was clean. I cooked. He didn't know what it was when a woman is actually in the room asking him, like, do you want something to drink? Before I got myself something to drink. Do you want something to eat? Before I started to eat my food, I would ask him, do you want to have a bite? I would come out of nowhere and just have a fruit bowl and just offer him some fruit. He didn't know none of this. So my husband, back then boyfriend, really thought this was a dream come true. He didn't know how to deal with none of this because all this me coming through, just being nurturing by nature, his peoples and his family didn't even do that for him. Like the family, there is no family unit. The average family, especially black American family, has barely a family unit. There is no breakfast, lunch, and dinner at set times. And these are things that I introduced my husband to with my family. Can you imagine that impact that I had on him back then? So gentlemen, do not be afraid of traveling. There are so many more women out there who are willing to take care of you. It doesn't matter if they're young. It doesn't matter if they're older. They are willing to take care of you, willing to work with you, willing to be a part of your life. You don't have to deal with whatever you are dealing with back in your hometown because unfortunately, a lot of American women are lost in the delusional world that they are living in, and they don't even understand that they are going to be lonely for a long time, if not for the rest of their life. They say by choice, but I don't believe them.
Can't disagree with anything that she said. That's a woman who's self-aware and who understands male nature. Something that black women tend to struggle with as a community, as a group, as a culture. Because I don't care what a woman believes about a man, what he should have done, what he should have accomplished. Every man just wants a woman who loves him, respects him, supports him, and is loyal to him. That's it. And he's going to go where the peace is, which is the one thing that black women as a community struggle to be able to provide in relationships when it comes to their men. Now, black women will say that it's the black men who are the problem. It's the men. The men do things. They lie and cheat, manipulate, deceive, gaslight. They make us react to them by the things that they do. They evoke those responses, those reactions out of us. Yes, but y'all pick those men. Not only do y'all pick those men, but y'all raise those men. The men who are going to treat y'all good, the men who is not going to lie to you, the man who's going to communicate, the man who's going to show you respect. You walk all over him. He ain't thug enough. He ain't hood enough. He don't challenge you enough. You don't want that man because you feel like he's a yes man. He's too agreeable and he's a pushover. Despite the fact that you don't even know him, that's merely based on your perception of his appearance and what you believe about his aura. And this is how black women put themselves in a hole. And I'm glad that this was another woman speaking from the outside, because we will say that women who aren't a part of the black community, men who aren't a part of the black community are not allowed to speak on it. And people outside of the black community will adhere to that bullshit as if they can't point out the observations about what they notice about the discrepancies, especially when it comes to our relationships and our mentalities and attitudes about relationships as a community. They're not allowed to point those out because, well, they don't want to be, I guess, ostracized from a community that they're not a part of, because surely criticism couldn't matter to them that much. They're not a part of the community. And then if you're in the community and you speak on it as I'm doing now, you get called a coon and a sellout, an Uncle Tom. You tap dancing for massa. You using the white man's talking points. But yet we see this abnormal dynamic only in Black American culture in relationships, with the highest rates of marriage instability, highest rates of relationship dissatisfaction, highest infidelity rates, highest divorce rates, lowest marriage rates, and more divorces occur than marriages. No other community or culture do we see this phenomenon demonstrated, yet we don't want anyone outside the community to call it out because they can't speak on black problems, and we don't want anyone within the community to speak on it because that's white people talking points, that's coon behavior. Well, then how the fuck are we supposed to solve the problem? How are we supposed to solve the problem and get the nuclear family back intact so that we can reap the benefits of what the nuclear family has reaped all throughout, as far back as we can go back, the history of the nuclear family? More stable households, a better income, which leads to a higher socioeconomic status, a higher quality of life, children who are mentally and emotionally healthier than being raised by single mothers, which is the predominant parent-child dynamic in the black community. If we can't call that out, how are we going to fix it? If we can't acknowledge it and accept that that's the problem, then how are we going to fix it? Because we can't continue to just uplift and empower and pretend that that does nothing. That's putting cologne over musk. We got to rip the fucking Band-Aid off and realize that the wound has not healed. How are we supposed to do that? That's why I'm glad this woman outside of the community called it out, because this is indeed the truth. All average men, average, rich, doesn't matter. A man wants a woman who provides peace, who respects him, who supports him, who nurtures their relationship, is loyal to him, and gives him sex. That's what men want. We want women to provide us with respect, support, some nurture and care, loyalty, and peace. That's what we want. So when you have a community of women who struggles to give their community of men that, and always wants to blame the man, or when there's conflict feels the need to get disrespectful and emasculate, and is more concerned with herself and her image and her accolades, her qualifications, and competing with her man, having a penis swinging contest with her man. When you have a community of women who are more adept at doing those things than any other community of women, the men are going to be discouraged from dating those women. And when they experience softer, more feminine, more compassionate, more agreeable, less neurotic, when they experience those type of women, they're going to naturally gravitate to those type of women. It's not going to be even close in competition, because that's what men are receptive to in women. Women who are feminine, agreeable, who listen, who are submissive, who want to understand that man, who supports that man, who respects that man, even in conflict. That's what promotes appreciation and value in a woman from a man. And black women can't seem to comprehend this. And there was some black women who were eating her up on TikTok because, as I said, they're not allowed to speak about it. But the reality is, someone has to call it out. It needs to be from both internal and external sources. And then it has to be acknowledged within black women themselves, regardless of how we got here. Now, I ain't going to blame the white man, slavery, oppression. I'm not blaming none of that, because we're all human beings and we all have our own agency over how we choose to go about life, how we conduct ourselves, the ways in which we respond and react to our environment, and the direction we choose to go once something is brought to our attention that is problematic or it has deleterious effects. Once those things have been evaluated by our self-awareness, then we can determine what's the next best course of action. And when it comes to relationships in the black community, we don't want to do that. Especially the women. They don't want to do that. They just want to point the finger at black men. And simps and panderers want to point the finger at black men and say, well, it's your fault. It can't be his fault when she chose him and when they raise those men to behave like that. They raise manipulative men. They raise killers. They raise men who gaslight. They raise abusive men as single mothers because they themselves do a lot of those things. They themselves are bitter black women, are bitter single mothers. And had they tried to be healthier and more relationship oriented in their own relationships, then maybe they wouldn't be raising those little boys alone who grow up to become those men that black women complain about all day on Instagram and TikTok. Just maybe. And then if they were able to accept some criticism and take some accountability and say, you know what, you're right, I'm going to change that about myself. I'm going to work on that. The next man I date, I'm going to try to do that. If they did that, if they took that approach, they would see that their dating outcomes would be much more effective. Not only would they attract healthier men, they would be more receptive to healthier men because typically we attract all kinds of people, but we're receptive to the people who are most like us. And that speaks volumes for the current state of black American relationships. We're receptive to the people who behave like us. If a black woman thinks she needs to be handled, then what type of black man do you think she's going to be receptive to? An abusive one. Because that's the only way you can handle a mouthy woman. You either punch her in the fucking face or you walk away. And most men aren't going to walk away from pussy. Not to mention some of the antagonistic proclivities that black women have when they want to compete or they're upset or they're angry. There are black women who egg black men on. That's the reality of the cesspool that is black American relationships at this point. So the black men out there who can attract softer, sweeter, feminine women like this German woman is explaining, a woman who knows her place, knows her role, and looks to help and fulfill and satisfy her man, that's where they're going to go. And black women will continue to say, where are all the good black men at? After they've realized they've had their fun and dated a bunch of abusive, narcissist, psychopathic men and have been emotionally damaged, have kids now, and can't find a man to grow old and happy with.